Okay, hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Retro Muscle. Today's episode will be a contest recap of the 1977 WBBG Pro Mr. America, Mr. World, and Mr. Olympus. Now, before we get into it, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the World Bodybuilding Guild and its founder, Dan Lurie. Unfortunately, these days, Lurie, who is one of bodybuilding's founding fathers, is hardly talked about. And I've always been so fascinated with this guy because not only was he a four-time most muscular winner in the AAU's Mr. America competitions, but he was also a bit of a carny. And I don't mean that negatively, but everything he was involved with dealt with strength and muscularity, like promoting wrestling or his portrayal as Seal Test Dan on CBS's Big Top in the 1950s. On top of this, Lurie was also an entrepreneur who sold weightlifting equipment. Actually, in the early 1980s, my dad drove out to Brooklyn to pick up some plates and a DAX machine. But originally, Lurie had sold his plates through Joe Weider's magazine, Your Physique, in the 1940s. It was actually pretty interesting to learn that these two had actually worked very close together at one time, but their relationship soured. In 1948, Lurie promoted an independent show from the AAU called the Mr. New York State. This show was the first time Lurie had used the name International Federation of Bodybuilders. Yup, the IFBB. Lurie had even promoted this show in Weider's magazine, but in time there would be disputes over the name and other financial problems. But this eventually drove Lurie to not only start his own magazine company, but he also created one of the top bodybuilding organizations called the World Bodybuilding Guild. Probably my favorite thing about the WBBG was that there was no penalty for competing in different organizations. So you could jump around. You can go from the AAU to there. You can go to another country. And, other federations, if you did stuff like this, you would either get like a heavy fine or you'd be suspended from contests or even guest appearances. The whole thing is a real can of worms, but an interesting story. I've actually been reading Lurie's book, Heart of Steel, so I'll definitely be making a video devoted to him soon. Anyway, let's get back to 1977. It's September 9th, New York City, and it's the first time ever the World Bodybuilding Guild was putting on a show at Madison Square Garden. In total, the entire show cost Lurie close to $20,000 and a year's worth of planning. Originally, he had a real interesting idea for the posing platform. It would have a three-way mirror set up behind the platform for like this unique effect while the competitors were doing their posing routines. But since the Garden had their own stagehands, probably union guys, the extra cost would have been way too much, so they had to settle for the standard theater setup at the Felt Forum. Now, prejudging took place on Friday morning at 10 a.m. The show was emceed by Tony Shatina and scored by over 20 judges. Now, instead of wasting your time and listing them all off, I'm just going to put them here on the screen for you guys to read. You could pause the video if you'd like and check them out. There's some interesting names up there and actually professions too. But after prejudging concluded, many of the competitors, along with Lurie, traveled to Central Park where they met local news broadcasters from WNEW to promote not only the upcoming night's show, but they were also holding a Hall of Fame dinner at the Statler Hilton Hotel. That Saturday afternoon, the ballroom was packed with a lot of familiar faces in the bodybuilding scene, not to mention some major sports figures and icons were being awarded that afternoon, like Olympic discus champion Al Order, mountain climber George Willick, who had just famously climbed one of the World Trade Center towers. You also had the reigning WWF heavyweight champion, superstar Billy Graham, the immortal Steve Reeves, and Serge Nubret, and probably the heaviest hitter of the night, in my opinion, former boxing heavyweight champion Joe Louis. And actually, it looked like the original advertisement for this dinner. There was supposed to be a few other celebrities like Sylvester Stallone, but due to filming his upcoming movie Fist, he was unable to make it. And actually, he ended up sending his brother Frank Stallone to accept the award on his behalf. Probably my favorite thing that I had read while I was researching this whole entire thing was that Vince McMahon himself was actually the one who introduced superstar Billy Graham before accepting his award. And after Superstar thanked everyone, he basically cut a promo about Steve Reeves being the best bodybuilder and calling him a god. I love when these two worlds collide. But anyway, after the award dinner wrapped up, the fans and the competitors made their way back to 32nd Street for the night show. I guess before we talk about the Pro Mr. America, we're going to cover the teen division first and Masters and the Miss Body Beautiful. The Teenage Mr. America had 25 competitors overall, which was its biggest turnout yet for this competition, according to Muscle Training Illustrated. But in an Ironman article by Bob Berry, there's only 20 competitors listed, so I'm not sure on the exact amount, but either way, that's a pretty big turnout for the division. Coming in 5th place was Dave Brandman, and unfortunately there are no photos of this competitor in any of the magazines that I could find. Anyway, in 4th place, we have Chris Neely, and finishing in 3rd place was Mark Masud. In 2nd place, we had Mike Floor, and the 1977 Pro Teenage Mr. America went to 17-year-old Dan Morrow, who had also recently won the title of Mr. Ridgepike. Okay, let's go on to the over 50 Pro America. This category only had 3 competitors in total and was described as the only weak point of the night. In 3rd place, we had George Papp. In 2nd was Ken Acosta. And the over 50 Pro Mr. America title winner was Andy Bostino. Okay, let's move on to the over 40 category, and this one had a little bit more competition and some pretty big names from the past. Coming in 3rd place was former AAU competitor Fred Jarrett. According to the writers, Jarrett was very close to placing 2nd, but was edged out condition-wise by the 5'4" John Bianculli. But neither of these competitors had the size and muscularity as the first place winner, and that was George Payne. This former Mr. Universe class winner showed up looking just as impressive as he did a decade earlier, according to some articles. And Payne not only walked away with the title, but he also walked away with $100 cash. Okay, let's go on to the Miss Body Beautiful. So it seems that this was more of a beauty pageant. Women's bodybuilding hadn't made its mark yet. But anyway, there was a good turnout. There was 12 competitors in total. And coming in 3rd place was Diana Williams. In 2nd place was Jacqueline Nebray, who, you guessed it, was married to Serge Nebray. She was actually pretty shocked afterwards with her placing, but the judges ended up awarding 1st place to Linda Johnson, who was a former Miss Norway and stunt woman for television. Okay, let's go on to the Pro Mr. America, and this is, in my opinion, the main attraction because not only are there cash prizes, but the overall winner would get a free plane ticket to London to represent America in the upcoming NABBA Mr. Universe. All right, let's start with the short class winners. Coming in 3rd was Jason Friedman. In 2nd was the muscular Derek Prescott, who, according to some writers, could have placed higher, but lacked that polished look. And finally, coming in 1st in the short class was the local favorite, Annabelle Lopez. At this time, Lopez was 34 and was a part-time trainer at the Jacqueline Lane Gym and a full-time employee for the New York Transit Authority. Okay, let's move on to the medium class. Coming in 3rd place was Dave McCann. In 2nd place was the well-proportioned and sharp George Karras. Along with his great shape, Karras put on a great posing routine, according to the writers, but his size kept him from the title. Coming in 1st place in the medium category was 28-year-old Don Ross, representing Detroit, Michigan. Standing at 5'10", Ross came into the show weighing 212 pounds with 19-inch arms. He was not only the biggest in this category, but definitely the most vascular, especially when he hit that most muscular. Okay, let's move on to the tall category. 3rd place went to Richard Sejedin. 2nd went to the really impressive Harcourt Skinner, but neither of these competitors had the size and symmetry as Joe Spooner. Originally from the island of St. Lucia, Joe Spooner was now 29 years old, living in Jersey, and studying at Rutgers. Okay, after all the class winners were awarded, the judges presented the winners of the subdivisions like Best Abs and Most Muscular, and I'll list that right here. But finally, in the end, the overall winner of the Pro Mr. America title went to Don Ross, and he narrowly won with only 3 points, just ahead of Annabelle Lopez. And Joe Spooner, who came in 3rd, was actually pretty annoyed with the decision because he kind of complained afterwards on Lopez's behalf, in a way, because he said, how can you win all these different subcategories but not get the overall title? Which, I've always kind of agreed with. It makes things a little more confusing. But regardless, Ross ended up winning the title and his shot at the upcoming universe in a few weeks to come. And just for anyone who's interested, he ended up placing 5th. Okay, let's move on to our next competition of the evening, and that's the Mr. World. Coming into the show, the clear favorite for the Mr. World title was Warren Frederick, but there was a last-minute entry that came in that would change the course of everything. Okay, let's list the top 5 competitors. Coming in 5th place, we have Kenny Hall. In 4th place, we had Serge Larusse. Coming in 3rd was the former Mr. France with excellent shape and definition, and that's Gerard Benoud. He looked great, but definitely was lacking the size that Warren Frederick was carrying, and he actually ended up taking 2nd place. Finally, coming in 1st was the last-minute entry from France, and that was Serge Nabret. Serge was the clear winner before he had even walked on stage. Actually, according to an article I read, as soon as Warren Frederick heard about Serge's entry into the competition, his jaw literally dropped, and he asked why. And according to Muscle Training Illustrated, Nabret said, "I haven't won this yet." Oof, that's kind of rough. And it actually doesn't get much better for Frederick because the final competition of the night, the Mr. Olympus, only had 2 competitors. And they were Warren Frederick and Serge Nabret. And you guessed it, Nabret walked away with another title that night and $1,500 in cash. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and if you want more information on the show or just other classic bodybuilding content, go check out my Instagram page at RetroMuscleMags. See you guys next week.